Hi, Tiger Craven Neely. I'm a retired teacher in California, 15 years in the closet, 15 years out of the closet. I'm retired now. My civic duty, I feel, is to share some LGBT books that might be appropriate for your classroom, share some personal stories, reminders about California laws that protect LGBT kids, and the California History and Social Studies Frameworks, Chapter 20 on equity and access. Today, before I read, I wanted to share a couple thoughts on why it's important to read LGBT books in your classroom. Number one is LGBT is a culture. Some people would argue, they would say that's not a culture. But LGBT people have a shared history. We have similar medical issues. We have similar political concerns. We have similar financial statuses, similar harassment issues, how society sees us, things we're combating together, similar language and slang. So we are a culture, and that culture should be represented in your classroom. Another argument I like to make is, unlike other minority groups, and we are a minority group, and often minority groups are harassed, they're dominated over the majority. But unlike other minority groups like racial or religious minority groups that might have a stronger advocacy base, we lack advocacy a lot of times, especially the kids in your classrooms, the children and the youth. For example, if you have a child who's African American and they come to school, hopefully not, but in a case where they might experience discrimination, they go home, they have a parent advocate. They can go, hey, Mom, this happened at school. Mom can call and say, hey, look, somebody called my child this name. What are you going to do about it? This has got to stop. This is not right. Or a child who's maybe they're Jehovah's Witness. They come to school, they come home sad. What's wrong, honey? Well, they were having a party. I couldn't participate. Well, honey, these are the things we can do, and this is why we don't do that. Some kind of support at home. Unlike LGBT, often they don't have the parent support. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. I shared in one of my videos, a 12-year-old in one of my 6th grade classrooms came to me and said, Mr. C, I have the same problem you have. May I ask you something? What do I do if my parents and I don't agree? She did not have the same kind of parent support. So it's important for us as educators to support the kids. And reading LGBT books is one of the ways to normalize LGBT. Now, a lot of religious groups would say, no, we don't want to normalize it because they view it as a perversion or a sin. Well, that's the religious, that's their I can't think of the word. That's their business. But we're public school. Just like the California Department of Education in their History Social Studies book says, we're responsible for educating all children, regardless of their sexual orientation or their gender identification. So I'm going to read Twas the Night Before Pride. Prerogative, that's the word I was looking for. That's their prerogative. The religious schools, that's their prerogative in their school. They don't want to teach LGBT issues. Or a public school. 'Twas the night before Pride. Excuse me. 'Twas the night before Pride, a warm evening in June. All the people got ready with the rise of the moon. Now I'm reading this with the idea not so much for students, but for the adults, for the educators, administrators, just to role model. Look at what you can do in your classrooms. The drag queens all brushed their wigs with great care, and the bikers checked their tires to make sure they had air. All across the city, people's outfits were planned and instruments polished for the queer marching band. My mom told us all we should go to bed early. She's that kind of mom who's more boyish than girly. It's okay to be more boyish than girly. While Mama finished packing our snacks in a bag, Sammy started chewing on the edge of our flag. There's Sammy over here. As I finished my sign, which I laid on the floor, I remembered the prides I'd been to before. All day we will walk in the streets up and down. Pride's one of the best celebrations around. There are floats and loud music and rainbows and glitter. Last year we ran into our babysitter. Tomorrow will be baby Sammy's first Pride. Can we tell the story? I hopefully cried. So we sat on the couch, a mom on each side, and took turns telling the tale of the very first Pride. A long time ago, in 1969, there wasn't a Pride March. It was less a fair time. Queer people all over, of each shape and size, didn't have any rights recognized. So much of their lives they had to keep hidden. Even their clothing was sometimes forbidden. Stonewall was a place where it was safe to be proud, but police would storm in to say this wasn't allowed. So one hot night in June, people stopped being quiet. They decided to fight and started a riot. More and more gathered to fight back in the heat. Some started a kick line in the middle of the street. Police broke up the crowd night after night, but the people stood strong, knowing this wasn't right. And so it began, a march that spread worldwide to show everyone it's good to have pride. It sometimes happens we're not given respect. It can take a long time for some to accept. That's why every year we all get together and march in the streets, no matter the weather. To know that we matter, to show we all exist, and that any oppression we must always resist. So Pride's not just about tutus and rainbow suspenders. It's about rights for queers and all our beautiful genders. Pride's a day that is crowded. It's a day that is long. It's a day that means together we stand strong. As I closed my eyes, I thought of Pride's past. Pride means, to me, being yourself is a blast. So tomorrow I will march with my family and cheer. Happy Pride to all. It's great my family is here. And that's the end. We're 3 to 5%, by the way. Gallup polls, surveys, anecdotal experiences. I grew up in Fremont, California. It was a suburb. We didn't have very many queer role models then. There were rumors. Liberace, we thought was gay. Rock Hudson, Gomer Pyle, that was it. Maybe Billie Jean King. They were all in the closet. Those few great gay role models. I remember going to my first Pride event, my first Pride parade, feeling so alone in the suburbs. And then I went to this Pride event and there were tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, either gay or advocating for gay people. It was so empowering for me. It was a real self-esteem booster. I want to share a couple stories. One is called my TMIs about me. And again, these videos are more for the adults than the children. So I was married to a woman. I abstained from homosexuality mainly for religious reasons. I abstained from homosexuality several years before I met my future wife. We were married for 18 years, dated for 2. For 23 years, I abstained from homosexuality. I never hid anything from my ex-wife. It's always something I just referred to as my struggle. And I was monogamous. Little TMI, there's the TMI part. But when we divorced and I dated several people. One of the gentlemen I dated, he had divorced a woman. She decided she was lesbian. She remarried. She had a wife. He was dating me. Well, we took his 5th grade son to a pride parade. I think it was in San Jose. And we're walking around with our bags and rainbow gear, and we're gathering, all the little, they have a bunch of booths, and they give away a bunch of little trinkets, free pencils, free erasers, free lip balm and stuff. We're gathering our little trinkets. And we ran into his ex-wife, and there is this 5th grader in a public school with dad and his boyfriend on one side, mom and her new wife on the other. That's a little, not extreme, but that's an example. We're out there. He was in a public school. I'm a public school teacher. I already shared in one of these videos the story of Mary, my coworker. She came to me. She said, Mr. C, I have a child in my class, has 2 moms. And the students are teasing her. I went out, got some LGBT books, and it seems like the students, their peers, are not teasing them as much. So that's good. That's our job as educators. Good job to Mary. The other story I wanted to share is I had a parent come to me one time in 2017. By the way, I think I shared this in other videos. I ended up resigning from Modesto City Schools. I filed a lawsuit. I had to file first a complaint through the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, which I believe now they're called the California Office of Civil Rights. If you sue a school district for harassment, LGBT harassment, it has to be vetted through the California Office of Civil Rights, then the DFEH. The DFEH looked at my complaint. They issued me a right to sue letter. Then I went and found a law firm. I found the California Civil Rights Law Group. They said, we will defend you on contingency. It was a 4 or 5 year legal process. We went through the discovery process. We went through depositions. They deposed about 4 Modesto City Schools administrators. I was deposed twice. And just before the court date, we settled out of court. They asked for mediation and we settled out of court. Now, I do want to say there was never a jury or judge that determined that Modesto City Schools had harassed me for LGBT. This is my opinion from my experience. Some people say, are you allowed to talk about those things? My lawyer explained to me when we settled with Modesto, they had in their final settlement an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. And I said, I can't sign that with that. And she said, I'll have them take that out. She had them take it out. She said, well, even if they kept it in, she said, there are laws that came out of the Me Too movement now that guarantee that people who are harassed can now speak about it in public. It's to protect my opinion, victims. So I am within my legal rights to talk about these things. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, that would be my argument. Anyway, thank you for letting me share my story. I wanted to add too, that parent that came to me, she said, Mr. C, this was the beginning of the 2017 year, when I had told my students, I said, I'm getting married. I said, super excited, I'm getting married to a nice man. And they went, oh my gosh, he's gay. California History Social Studies Framework says, have discussions with your students on how to treat diverse others. I'm diverse others. So I said, I'm going to have a discussion with them. I said, California, actually all across America now, gay people have the right to get married. So don't be surprised when you have, teachers who are married to the same gender. I said also, Senate Bill 48, there's a new law. It really wasn't that new. It had been out for about 5 years. I said, there's this new law, Senate Bill 48, says California teachers are supposed to highlight positive contributions of LGBT people. So don't be surprised if I mention LGBT people. That started a firestorm with some of my parents. They were filing complaints. School district was siding with them, which was all, in my opinion, illegal. But there was a parent who came to me covertly after school and said, Mr. C, I want you to know that I'm happy. I'm glad you're sharing positive things about gay people because I have a brother who is gay and I want my children who are in your class, you had 2 of them, to think of gay people in a positive way. So there are people who advocate for that. There are gay teachers, gay students, family members that do want to hear LGBT curriculum in the classroom. Anyway, and then with that parent, by the way, that school year, I just want to do a brief overview. In my opinion, I didn't really even talk about LGBT issues that much, and I would keep a record. So I've already shared with you what I shared that year about Senate Bill 48, about being married. Other than that, I talked about Harvey Milk. When we would compare and contrast Martin Luther King's speech, we would compare the YouTube visual version to the written speech, which is a standard to compare and contrast different kind of narratives, how they're put out in different genres. We would talk about martyrs. We would talk about Harvey Milk, who Harvey Milk is one of the first gay politicians. I mentioned Maurice Sendak when the children did book reports on their favorite children's authors. I would say, here's an author, Maurice Sendak, wrote Where the Wild Things Are. He was gay, like your teacher. I mentioned when we would compare and contrast Sandra Day O'Connor, our first woman Supreme Court Justice, and we would talk about how the Supreme Court Justice worked, and we would talk about judicial jurisdiction or review, and I would talk about gay marriage. Here in gay marriage, it was illegal in some states, legal in some, and here the Supreme Court had this judicial jurisdiction and said, hey, it violates the Constitution to ban gay marriage, to make it illegal. So that was an example of judicial jurisdiction. And then when the students would they would write reports on their hero, on a famous person. And I asked the principal, I said, may I put some books up in my classroom on my heroes, which are LGBT people I've come out of the closet? She said, absolutely, that's within your right. That was a good principal. And then she left, and then the next principal was harassing me, calling me up, saying, hey, why do you have these books? One student said one of them has a profanity in it. And I said, our curse word, I said, well, a blubber by Judy Blume is in our library, has a profanity, as a word, it's profanity. And I said, Jerry Spinelli's book, I think it's Crash, is in the library, has a word that's profanity. I said, are you going to censor those books, or you just want me to censor the LGBT books? See, that's discrimination. When you focus on one minority group and not the other, it's discrimination. Anyway, that list, I want to say something. I kept a list of any time I shared. And then one time I was sharing to my students, saying, what did you do this weekend, Mr. C? I said, my husband and I went and tried out a new restaurant, it's Italian. And then next thing I know, I got a letter, Mr. C, a parent is wanting to know why you're sharing your sexual preferences. I said, I'm not sharing my sexual preferences. I am being myself. I'm doing what my colleagues do. I've seen colleagues bring spouses to school to share their professions, to sing happy birthday to them, to have their family come and volunteer for Dr. Seuss days or carnivals. And here I'm a gay teacher, mention the gender of my spouse, and they're wanting me to defend myself. My principal said, I'm just the messenger. She was following Craig Ridquist, the HR director. She said, he told me I have to call students out of your class and ask them if they've heard these things. That's harassment. That was harassment. Anyway, I kept a list, and I remember a student of mine that from the year before came to visit me that year. After school, she was super excited. She said, Mr. C, I wanted to tell you that I'm identifying as bisexual. She was then 13. And I said, oh, that's good. And we talked a little bit. I wrote a little note down, keeping my record in case I was, held accountable or something. And this 13-year-old said, what are you writing? I said, well, for my own protection, I have to write down anytime I talk about LGBT. She said, Mr. C, that's not right. That's not right that they make you do that. Out of the mouth of babes. Even a 13-year-old recognized the discrimination. Anyway, thank you for letting me share. Those are all the things I wanted to share. Him and Odd, this is a long video. My intention is that maybe a school district, an administrator would want to view these during their summer, nothing else better to do. Or maybe a teacher, or maybe, if your teachers can stand, this is almost 20 minutes, you could use it in a staff in-service or something. You have my permission. Anyway, I want to end with a quote. The only perverse thing about homosexuality is society's insane inability to accept human nature. It's just human nature. It's a natural deviation, just like being left-handed. We didn't ask to be gay. We didn't ask to be gay. Your kids in your classrooms are discovering it. Support them. They don't have very many advocates. It's up to you to make sure they're protected. Not only my opinion, it's the law. It's the law. And the California Department of Education wants you to do that. God bless. Thank you.